Welcome to REVO Woman, where the vibrant voices of our church community come together to explore relevant theological topics and discuss stories of women in the Bible. Here, we'll share a sacred space for women to connect, share, and grow in their spiritual journey with Jesus. So whether you're a seasoned scholar or a newcomer to the Word, REVO Woman invites you to discover and consider the timeless wisdom and empowerment found in the Scriptures. May these conversations help to equip and encourage your next step of faithful obedience in Christ.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the REVO Woman Podcast. My name is Candace.
And I'm Kristen.
We are so excited that today we are going to be talking about Rahab. And the last few weeks, we've been discussing women from the book of Genesis. But today, we're going to jump forward in our lesson over 400 years. And we're talking about the descendants of Abraham and Sarah have grown into a mighty nation. And Moses has led them out of oppression in Egypt and into the wilderness. So we're picking up today's lesson in the book of Joshua with a focus on the character Rahab. And what's going on in the story is the Israelites are about to seize the promised land. And God instructs them to go to the city of Jericho, where Rahab lives, and to destroy it. But beforehand, they're going to go and scout it out. So the scouts are going to Jericho. And before their mission, Joshua sends them there to take a look at the land. So the scouts go into Jericho, and this is where they meet Rahab. And she helps them escape from Jericho and bargains for her life and that of her family as well. And the Israelites ultimately deliver on their promise of saving Rahab when they destroy the city and allow her to join their community.
Yeah, so let's start at the very beginning.
Okay, let's break it down.
The spies are in Jericho, so they make it to the walls, and yes, this is Jericho. The walls come tumbling down. For all of the VeggieTale peoples. You're picturing slushies flying over the walls. That's what I think of when I think of this story. It was left out of the VeggieTales episode, though, so.
This is how we know you have small children.
Yes.
You teach the Bible through VeggieTales.
Absolutely. So the spies are in Jericho. They come in, and they stay at Rahab's house. And the king hears about it. And so when the king hears that they're spies, there's a rumor mill going around Jericho too. People know that God's people are coming. So I think that is important to mention, because the king it's not just two random people came to town. It's the Lord's people came to town. And so he knows what's coming next. So he sends his guards. They want to track them down, probably kill them, keep them from getting the lay of the land back to the tribes. And Joshua. So Rahab is a quick thinker. She figures out how to hide them up on the roof. She puts them under straw and hides them so that when the guards come, she makes up this whole story. Oh, they were here, but they left. They went out the city gates. They turned this way. If you hurry, she's like very, very adamant. If you hurry, you'll catch them. They just left. And so the guards believe her and they take off. And after that, she goes up and she gets the spies and she says, they're gone. So we'll pick up in Joshua 2, verse 9 through 13. This is too good. I'll read chunks of this, but it's too good for me to summarize. This is Rahab talking to the people, the spies from the Israelites. This is what she says to them. She says, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the king of the Amorites, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear. And our courage failed because of you, because your Lord is God in heaven above and on earth below. So she is making a faith proclamation ultimately and saying, I believe your God is the one true God. And we know that if y'all are going to get this land, that there's no way that you're not actually going to get it. Like, he's going to give you Jericho. So here's what she says. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family, because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my father, my mother, my brothers and my sisters, and all who belong to them, that you will save us from death.
Yeah. So what I'm seeing is two things. One, Rahab has faith. She has genuine faith that the God of the Israelites is the one true God. And it's faith only through the stories that she's heard through the people in her community. She's not experienced God personally yet.
Yeah.
But she has faith. She believes. And then 2, not only does she believe, she actually takes action on that faith.
Yeah.
She moves. She bargains for the life of her family. She hides the spies. She sends away the palace guards. She's involved in the story. She's taking an active role in living out her faith, not just keeping it in her heart, but actually acting on it.
Yeah, and by doing all of this, she puts her own life in danger. If the king had found out that she was hiding the spies and that she lied to the guards, they would have killed her immediately. So the fact that she was willing to lay her life down, put her life on the line, and probably her entire family's life too, could have been at risk because of what she did. The fact that she was willing to do that, and then, she turns and she's like, okay, like this is what I did, and here's my faith proclamation. This is why I did it. That's such a great model for us to see that, it's faith is what saves, but the actions, the boldness to then immediately go and risk her life for these spies that she doesn't know anything about, really. That's what goes hand in hand with faith as action.
So it makes me think of the verse from James 2:24. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. Mm-hmm. And I know this is a contentious passage. I mean, it's been debated for centuries to no end.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's so clear through Rahab's story what God is saying. A truly transformed heart, a real surrendered faith acts in response.
Yeah.
It is not your works that justify your faith. It is your faith that produces the works. You can't not act if your heart is really in Christ.
Yeah. I think one of the most helpful analogies that I've heard on this is being a sports fan. If I claimed to be a Philadelphia Eagles fan, which I do claim to be, but I didn't know a single person on the team. I couldn't tell you what colors they wear. I couldn't tell you what sport they played. I never watched a game. Then you guys would look at me and be like, okay, you're not a real fan. Like, that's cool that you know a team name, but like, you're not really a fan. But because I care about the Eagles and I care about the football team, I'm going to watch as many games as I possibly can. I'm going to dive deep into the roster and make sure I know who our quarterback is and, what our chances of winning the Super Bowl are, which they were really great this past year and we just bombed it. But that's a whole nother topic. But that is going to prove to people, oh, like, she really knows what she's talking about. She cares about this team. And that's very similar to faith and works. Might be a bit of a stretch, but it's a good example of if we claim that Jesus is Lord of our life, but nothing in our life reflects him, that's going to be really tricky for people to come to terms with. They're going to be like, wait, you out of your mouth, you speak this thing, but all of your actions prove something else. So that to me has been kind of like a reconciliation of that verse to go, well, it just makes sense that if I believe in God, that I'm going to be doing things, I'm going to be looking more like God. You're not going to go to the Eagles game in a plain white t-shirt. You're going to put on the jersey to support the team. And that's kind of the same deal with our faith and our works.
Yeah, I think that the other part of this that just sticks out to me so much is that Rahab wasn't only bargaining for her own life, she was bargaining for the lives of her family. Mm-hmm. And you think about how bold of an ask this must have been. I mean, what right did she have to ask for anything? But she says, not only do I want you to save me, I want you to protect the lives of my family when you come and sack the city. And the spies agree to it. And so Rahab is having a generational impact. Her faith, her action is going to impact not just her lives, but countless others through what she's willing to do.
Yeah, and I think that's important. As we move on in the story, she makes this ask and the spies have a chance to respond. They don't have to say yes because regardless, the Lord is giving them this land.
Yep.
So I think that's been a newer realization to me that they could have just said, actually no. But this is their response in Joshua 2:14-15. They say, our lives for your lives. If you don't tell what we are doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. And so she lets them down by a rope through the window and she lets them escape in the city wall or outside of the city wall.
Yep.
And so not only do the spies say, we'll treat you kindly if you'll not tell anybody. But there's like this agreement that's going on between them. And so they have the opportunity to say yes or no. And so I think it's pretty cool how the two spies end up leaning in and going, this has got to be part of God's plan to save Rahab and her family, because they recognize God's favor. What if they had gone into any other house, somebody who would have immediately ratted them out? They ended up in the house of a believer, essentially is what this is. And so they recognize the hand of God, and then they agree, yeah, Rahab will save you, and not only you, but your whole family.
Yeah, that's a great point. So they enter into this oath with Rahab, and she helps them escape. And the spies return to Joshua, and they tell them about the agreement that they've made with Rahab. And when Joshua hears about it, he agrees. So there's an act of faith here as well on Joshua's part. And so Joshua 6:17 says, here's Joshua's response: Jericho and everything in it must be completely destroyed as an offering to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and the others in her house will be spared, for she protected our spies. And so Joshua chooses to honor that covenant promise that the spies made with Rahab. And it's a symbolic, actually, promise of the way that God honors his covenant with us, and specifically the Passover promise story.
Yeah.
And so we could get into that in great detail, but I just think it's beautiful how Rahab had to be faithful. The spies had to be faithful. Joshua had to be faithful.
Yeah.
All of these people had to lean into God's plan to see it actually work out the way that he intended.
Yeah. And I'll go into the Passover story just a little bit, but talking about faithfulness, then, Joshua releases the armies in Jericho. They do the marching around the cities and everything. When the walls fall down, the armies rush in. And so they're then carrying out these orders, and they have to be faithful too, because they had to find Rahab. They have to find her family. They have to identify her house, and then make sure that, everything else is put to destruction, but not this family, not this house. And so the way that they did that was with a crimson cord. That was what they told her. They said, let down this crimson cord, put this in your window, put this here to mark your house. And I think that's so beautiful, because we've already hinted at the Passover story. The Passover story, when the Israelites were in Egypt, they put the blood of the lamb over the doorpost. And so they have a crimson painting over their doorpost. And that was how the angel of death knew to pass over the houses. And so once again, here comes the army of the Lord, so to say, the Israelites coming into the city, and here they are. They're going to, rush and take over everything except the one house that has the red crimson cord on it. And what a beautiful wink that is to Jesus, that when you are covered by the blood of the Lamb, when you've got that crimson cord that signifies that you're a child of God, that you have faith in the Lord, that's a saving faith.
Absolutely. And one other important piece of information we've withheld until that verse is that Rahab is a prostitute. We don't know if this is her active profession or something she was doing in the past, and now she's just the innkeeper. But this is part of her identity. This is how the people of Jericho knew Rahab the prostitute. And so to the Israelites, not only is she an outsider, a Canaanite woman, but she is ceremonially unclean. She's soaked in sin. I mean, she is the top of the list of the sinners.
Yeah.
And so what does it say to you that Joshua was willing to accept Rahab the prostitute into the Israelite community?
Yeah. I mean, Rahab's story is just one of redemption. That to me is like the overarching word throughout this. And I love that Joshua, the spies, and ultimately the Israelite community comes to terms with the basic concept that there is no one too far gone for God to redeem. It was very clear that the Lord put Rahab in their path, and they all had faith that there was a purpose behind it. So rather than being people who turned their nose up or thought, well, you can live here, but like on the outskirts of town, or like poor Rahab, they truly accepted her into part of the community. And we'll see just the power of her being part of the Israelite family. But I just think it's so refreshing to see that they trusted that God had a plan for Rahab. They trusted that God redeemed Rahab. And then there's nothing else recorded that talks about the details of that. I'm sure there was a massive life change for Rahab that had to happen, especially if it was her current profession. That's an awkward conversation. So you can't do that anymore here. We don't really live that way. But ultimately, they just had to trust that this is all purposeful. And they did that when they accepted her into the family. And then the next things we hear about her are her getting married.
Yeah. So I think it's so incredible that God gives us this example of Rahab as, it makes me think of Paul's language, like the chief sinner, and how anyone can be redeemed.
Yeah.
No matter what is in our past, no matter where we come from, who our family is, what we have done, that when we accept Jesus's atonement on our behalf, we are clean.
Yeah.
We get new life. And that new life means that we have to change.
Yeah.
Yes, our sins are forgiven, but they're not forgiven so we can keep on committing them. There's an expectation that transformation is going to occur and that our actions are going to be changed because of the acceptance of that grace and that love.
Yeah.
And so just a few verses I thought that kind of built on that and connected it through from these Old Testament stories to what we get in the New Testament. But Romans 6:4 says, "For we died and were buried with Christ by baptism, and just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glorious power of the Father, now we also may live new lives." So Rahab had to let her old life go so that she could embrace her new life with the Israelites as part of God's family.
Yeah.
2 Corinthians 5:17, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come." And so we see it from the very beginning. This was always God's plan.
Yeah.
We see that he always had a plan to take anyone from the old self to new life. And I just think it's beautiful that the Bible, over the course of thousands of years, is telling the same cohesive story. We see it here with Rahab, and we see it today.
Oh, yeah, all the time. Rahab is one of the first Gentiles that is grafted into the story of the Israelites. And I think that's sometimes easy for us to forget that originally God's chosen people were just the Israelites. That would have excluded all of us. But God wanted everyone to be drawn into his heart. And so Rahab is just the first example of one that we see where her story and her line actually gets pulled into the narrative in so many more ways than just this simple instance. But it just shows us that God's design is truly that your old life has passed away and that you are a new creation. And because of that, we have so much freedom to walk in his grace, in his mercy, and just in thankfulness to him for what he's done for us every single day.
Yeah. And I think it's so cool how in the New Testament, we get proof from Matthew of what the outcome of the story is. Mm-hmm. He opens the book by explaining the genealogy of Jesus. And it's from the very beginning and runs all the way through. This is the son of this man. This is the son of this man. But finally says the name of a woman. And right there in the bloodline of Jesus is Rahab. She's the mother of Boaz. And so few women are mentioned in this family line, but God makes a point to put it in his word that Rahab was part of the story, part of the plan from the very beginning, that he was going to redeem her life in her sin, use her to be a part of bringing the Messiah to the earth. How incredible is that?
Yeah. So cool. And tracing it back to our last episode talking about Leah, that means that Leah and Rahab are actually related too. So it's Leah's son, Judah, who ends up, being part of the bloodline as well. So it's just so cool to see how these women who are forgotten, in the case of Leah or in the case of Rahab, she probably would have counted herself out because of her sin. She would have said, I'm not worthy of this. And God says, no, I alone call you worthy. And I'm pulling you in, not so you can continue sinning like we've said, but that you can walk as a new creation. It's just so beautiful to see. I love that Hebrews 11, that's like the hall of faith is what people call it. It's listing all of these great heroes of the faith. And Rahab gets another shout out there. What I love about that is it says it was by faith that Rahab the prostitute was not destroyed with the people in her city who refused to obey God. It lists out by faith, first of all, that she was not destroyed, but also it gives her full identity of the time. She was Rahab the prostitute. It's like, don't forget which Rahab we're talking about as we're bragging on these heroes of the faith, the people that God used because they had great faith. Rahab the prostitute, yeah, that Rahab, she's getting a shout out here. I mean, you're talking Abraham, like the big leaders of the faith, Moses are all listed there. And then snuck in there is Rahab the prostitute. Just so cool to see that you're never too far gone for God's plan.
And God says, I mean, it's so clear, I don't care what your title is. I don't care how important you think you are.
Yeah.
I can use anyone. I can redeem anyone. As long as you put your real, true faith in me, this is about my plan.
Yeah.
And so how beautiful that we get to see this through Rahab's story. If y'all want to explore this story in more detail on your own, you can find it in the book of Joshua in chapters 2 and 6. But we just invite you, explore Rahab's story in more detail and the way that God works through the Israelites and through Joshua. It is absolutely a phenomenal story. And so we're just grateful for this time to explore Rahab with you. We hope that this inspires you to do your own Bible reading, and we will see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the REVO Woman Podcast. If you found value in today's discussion, we invite you to like, comment, and share this episode with a friend so that we can help spread the message and hope found in Jesus. Lastly, you are always welcome to join us for our Sunday services streamed live on YouTube. See you next time.